They didn't wear uniforms. They didn't follow the rules of war. And they beat the most powerful empire on Earth, using tactics that were decades ahead of their time. So, why has nobody told you about the Boer Commandos, South Africa's original special forces? When we think of special forces today, we picture Navy SEALs, SAS, or Spetsnaz. But over 100 years ago, before drones, night vision, or high-tech gear, there was a group of rugged farmers in South Africa who used guerrilla tactics so brutally effective, they changed the way war was fought forever. This is the wild story of the Boer War, and how it secretly gave birth to modern special forces. Here's what you don't hear in most history books. At the end of the 19th century, the British Empire was on top of the world. They controlled everything from Canada to India to Australia. They thought they could just walk into South Africa, crush a tiny group of Boer farmers, and call it a day. But they didn't expect the Boers to fight back with sniper ambushes, sabotage raids, and stealth hit-and-run attacks. They weren't fighting a normal army. They were fighting ghosts on horseback. The Boers didn't have a proper military, no marching drills, no shiny medals, no generals in fancy hats. What they did have was something the British didn't: home terrain, survival skills, and a total refusal to play by the rules. So how did a small, ragtag group of rebels humiliate the biggest military power on Earth for 3 years straight? And how did their tactics inspire future elite units like the British SAS and even the German Afrika Korps? Let's go deep into the trenches, through mountains, deserts, and railways, and uncover how the Boer War secretly became the training ground for modern special ops. Part 1. The backstory: why the Boer War even happened. Let's rewind. South Africa in the late 1800s wasn't just about animals and open plains, it was a gold mine, literally. In 1886, one of the world's richest gold deposits was found near Johannesburg, deep inside Boer territory. The British, they wanted it, badly. But the Boers, descendants of Dutch settlers who had lived in the region since the 1600s, weren't interested in being colonized. They were farmers, hunters, and herders, tough as nails, and proud of their independence. Two Boer republics stood in the way: the South African Republic, also called the Transvaal, and the Orange Free State. The British believed they could just annex the Boers like they did with other colonies. But the Boers had other plans. By 1899, tension exploded into all-out war. But this wasn't going to be your typical redcoat parade. Part 2. The Boer Commandos, South Africa's original special forces. The Boers didn't fight like a regular army because they weren't a regular army. They had no central command, no formal training, and no strict ranks. They fought in commandos, small, mobile, self-organized groups of fighters who knew the land better than anyone. Think of them as early special ops teams, only instead of radios and rifles they had bolt-action Mausers, horses, and survival smarts. Each commando was made up of local men from the same area, so they trusted each other and moved as a tight unit. They rode fast, traveled light, and struck hard. They used hit-and-run tactics. They ambushed British supply lines. They cut telegraph wires, and they disappeared before anyone could catch them. To the British, it was infuriating. To modern military historians, it was genius. Part 3. Snipers, saboteurs, and the art of disappearing. Let's talk about how the Boers actually fought. They'd set up snipers in the hills with long-range rifles, often German-made Mauser rifles, deadly accurate. They'd scout British troops from miles away, strike from high ground, then vanish into the terrain before the Brits could even return fire. British soldiers, wearing bright red or khaki uniforms, marching in columns, were sitting ducks. The Boers wore brown, blended into the land, and didn't hesitate to shoot and move. They were masters of terrain warfare. They used natural cover, knew where every stream and ridge was, and never took unnecessary risks. Their horses were fast and resilient. They could ride for hours, rest for minutes, and keep moving. But here's the real trick: the Boers never stayed in one place for long. British generals kept planning for big, open-field battles. The Boers refused to give them one. Instead, they'd destroy a rail line, then vanish, blow up a bridge, then melt into the hills. Snipers would pick off officers, knowing that without leaders the British troops would panic. The British weren't used to this kind of war. They expected the Boers to fight properly, lined up, face-to-face like gentlemen. Instead, they got a guerrilla nightmare. So the British adapted, but not in a good way. They started using scorched earth tactics. They burned Boer farms, slaughtered livestock, poisoned wells. Then they built concentration camps, yes, actual concentration camps, to break the Boers' civilian support. Tens of thousands of Boer women and children were locked up. Over 26,000 of them died. Most of them were kids. It was one of the darkest chapters in British military history, and it showed just how desperate the Empire was to stop these guerrilla warriors. Part 5. Jan Smuts, the Boer who would teach the British. Now here's where it gets wild. One of the most brilliant Boer commanders, Jan Smuts, actually joined the British after the war and helped create a new kind of fighting force. Smuts had led deep raids into British territory, sometimes riding hundreds of miles behind enemy lines. His men would destroy supply bases, cut off communications, then vanish into the night. After the war, the British remembered Smuts, and when World War I rolled around, he was back, on their side this time, helping them develop more mobile, adaptable forces. But the real legacy came in World War II, when British Special Forces, especially the SAS, started copying Boer commando tactics. Fast, silent raids, deep behind enemy lines, maximum disruption, minimal footprint. The British had learned from the people who once humiliated them. Part 6. Lessons the world took from the Boers. It wasn't just the British. The German army studied Boer tactics too. During World War II, Rommel's Afrika Korps used rapid strikes and desert raids, eerily similar to Boer ambushes. Modern special forces, whether it's the US Delta Force, Russian Spetsnaz, or Israeli Sayeret Matkal, all trace some of their roots back to what the Boers did. Small unit tactics, stealth, surprise, self-reliance. These weren't ideas born in labs or military academies. They came from farmers on horseback with rifles and grit. The Boer commandos didn't just change warfare in South Africa, they rewrote the book on what elite soldiers could be. The turning point wasn't a single battle. It was the moment the world realized you don't need a giant army to win a war. You need flexibility, you need speed, and above all you need to understand your enemy better than they understand you. The Boers proved that. They made the British bleed, rethink, and adapt. They didn't win in the end, but their tactics survived long after their republics fell. Today, most people don't even know what the Boer War was, but its shadow is everywhere in modern warfare. Every time you see a small elite unit pulling off a raid behind enemy lines, every time you hear about guerrilla fighters outsmarting a superpower, you're seeing echoes of the Boers, those silent ghosts on horseback, who fought not with brute strength but with brain, speed, and brutal efficiency. If you enjoy our journey, please like and subscribe to our channel, and if you like our content and want to support me, you are welcome to buy me a coffee. The link is in the description box below.